Welcome to The Human Experience, a podcast about the stories we live out every day and the importance of championing the vulnerability and courage of the storyteller. I'm your host, Jennifer Peterkin, and it was through my own lived story of experiencing domestic violence that this podcast was created. By traveling the globe and interviewing each guest in person, I am convinced now more than ever that stories have the power to change the world. You can join our community of storytellers by subscribing, leaving a rating and review, signing up for my newsletter, following me on Instagram, and more. Thank you for being here. In a world full of noise, to listen with intention is an act of resistance.
So we're in your apartment in New York, looking out over the Hudson?
Mm-hmm. That is the Hudson River right there.
I mean, it's very limited experience in New York, so let me just tell you that. But I have such a, and this is probably because I have such a limited experience, but I have such a romantic notion of New York. Mm-hmm. And I would say cities in general. I think there's just so much possibility in cities and so many different people and things to do. I really have an affinity for them, even though I've never actually really lived in a big city. But you have been here your whole life.
My whole life. I was born in Manhattan Island, and I am still here, although I have lived other places for up to a year at a time.
Okay. But you are clearly a fan.
Very much so. And I'm very glad about the way you talked about New York, because I'm equally accustomed to people going, oh my God, how could you live in that disgusting, scary place? And I love it here. And I don't find it disgusting or scary, including during the years in the 70s and 80s when New York really was falling apart and was bankrupt, and parts of the Bronx, the landlords were burning their own houses, and all these horrible things were happening, and there were drug deals all over. Still, I lived in a nice neighborhood. I had a job here, and the city is full of vibrancy and life, and I'm lucky enough to live where you wouldn't imagine. I mean, you're looking out the window here, and there are trees out there.
Yeah.
And then a river.
Yeah, that's true.
So when I come home, I feel like I'm not in New York in that same way.
Yeah.
I'm in some quiet place. It's not the same as the country. In the country, you get smells that are beautiful, these windows, there's a heat wave outside. We have the air conditioning on. The windows are closed. I do have plants, but when I go to the country, the first thing I notice is how great it smells, which New York doesn't.
Yeah.
But I love theater and museums, and I love being able to walk everywhere and not needing to use a car. And I just love it here.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful. I mean, I think I have some rose-colored glasses on because I don't have any like real experience living in a place like this. But I think, again, cities in general, but especially New York, there is something just magical about it. There are the places where everybody gathers, right?
Yes.
And so the country, I love the country too. There's lots to be said for that. But with cities, I think it's really interesting. It's very much like the duality of, I feel like it represents the duality of life in a way, because even as you're saying, things were bad, but I was living in New York and I was okay.
Yes.
And so, New York's huge.
Yes. New
York City is huge. And so there's a lot going on. And so it's never going to be just one thing, right?
Yes. I think that's really true. I love the idea of the romance of this. People who've seen I live not far from where You've Got Mail takes place.
Okay.
That's just like half a mile down the street from here. And so that and a bunch of early Woody Allen, which romanticized New York.
Yeah.
I think that city is real.
Yeah.
I think that city is very real. I wouldn't say that I love every city the way I love New York. I tend to love cities that are older, that have public transit, that have interesting buildings, even if you yourself don't live in one. There's a big advantage living in a modern new building, with great infrastructure. But to go around the city and be bathed by architecture that spans 100 or 200 years, and New York isn't even that old a city.
Right.
But I have traveled a lot, and I've been in a lot of cities, and I put New York up there as one of the top 5 for just this sense of vibrancy.
Yeah.
And there's so much art and creativity here, as well as, the financial stuff. I mean, it almost no matter what you're into, you can find a hub of it here.
Yes. I just think there is something so beautiful about the idea. I think cities get a really bad rap, and people seem to be staunchly one or the other, country or city. And if you don't live in the city, you tend to be like, oh, I don't want to be in the city.
Right. And I would say if all you do is come here as a tourist and go to the really crowded areas, and maybe you come when the weather is pretty crummy, and New York has a lot of bad weather. You're not seeing the when You've Got Mail or When Harry Met Sally view of New York. You're seeing more of a cop show or something like that, and there are all these buildings and people, and it's hard to get around, and it feels terrible, and you can't wait to get out of here and be somewhere quiet and safe. I get that every night. I first of all, most days I don't go into the kind of neighborhoods I just described. And when I do, I come home and I'm in a nice, quiet residential neighborhood.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. But it's still very much New York. I mean, it's still very much a city, right? You are, I just think you're right. A lot of us come in to be a tourist for a day or two and only visit, specific spots. I mean, namely Times Square, right?
Sure.
It's Times Square or bust. And if that's all you see.
And that's sensory overload. That's people trying to sell you stuff on the street. There's just a whole lot going on there that is not going on in the rest of New York.
Not representative of. Yeah. Well, I think it's fabulous. This is my first time I've ever visited somebody that lives in New York. So I'm very happy to be here with you. Yeah.
I'm happy to have you here. This is very, very fun.
So we're here to talk about your story, not how much I think New York is magical.
Right.
So interestingly, you actually kind of brought this up when we were having lunch earlier, but I usually start by asking, if I ask you where your story begins, where do you start?
Oh, it so depends on whether we are talking about the story that I wrote about, which begins very particularly about 10 years ago on September 28th, 2014.
Wow.
When my wife and I learned that she had tumors in her back. Or you can go back like 40 years earlier to when she and I met, or you can go back even earlier than that to when I had this really fun childhood doing all kinds of cool things here. And by the time the, quote, story that I wrote about in Carrying the Tiger begins, I was in my late 50s. My wife was in her late 60s, 10 years older than me. And we had been together for 30 plus years, or 29 years at that point.
Yeah. Well, then I want to hear about when you guys met.
Okay. So we met in the fall of 1985 in the Columbia University swimming pool.
Okay.
I was 29 years old. And I was recently divorced. In fact, it wasn't finalized yet. And I was swimming there as my ex-wife's husband still on her Columbia membership. It was a relatively amicable divorce where she was letting me do that kind of thing, even though it was her idea that we should separate. And I was shattered by that and trying to prove to myself that I was still an attractive guy. I was dating. I'd been with my first wife all through my 20s.
Okay.
Hadn't done much dating in a long time. So I was like looking around, looking for someone to date, to prove to me that I was still had it. And there was a girl who swam regularly. I should pause for a second here. I wasn't looking for a date per se in the Columbia University swimming pool. I swam there for exercise like 5 times a week. And I usually swam between 1 and 2 o'clock because it fitted my schedule. And there was only a narrow window when they had recreational swim, when I could swim. And so I knew there were regulars there. And one day, Lynn, I did not know her name, in her tank bathing suit and cap and goggles, because we're all doing workouts.
Right.
She crossed from a slower lane to a faster lane right in front of me while I was stopped at the end of the pool. And I just blurted out, well, why were you swimming in that lane? You usually swim in this other one.
Oh, interesting.
And she kind of, I was kicking, meaning she had gone to a slower lane to use the kickboard, which, by the way, is a very respectful thing to do in a crowded swimming pool where people are working out and the lanes are organized by speed, and not everyone does it.
Okay.
So she went on. I came back the next day, and there she was again doing leg stretches at the end of the lane I was swimming in. And I stopped and started talking to her. We later realized that she assumed that because I had spoken to her like that, I was wildly attracted to her. At this point in her life, she had been through several relationships. She hadn't been in one in a few years. She was 39, approaching 40, and had already sort of given up on the idea of having a long-term relationship. And then this guy speaks to her out of the blue. She didn't know that I was talking like that to everybody. I had not noticed her in particular.
Yeah.
But I had noticed her in the way of that I had my antennae out and I knew what lane she normally swam in, and I probably knew that about 20 other people just because that's the kind of guy I am. Mm-hmm. She never used to stop to do leg stretches. She stopped deliberately in my lane doing those leg stretches because she thought, this guy's wildly attracted to me. I need to make a conversation possible. Mm-hmm. And that was our first conversation.
How long into your relationship did you find that out?
Oh, months.
Okay.
Months.
That's fantastic.
It's one of those things where we each just lived in what we thought was our knowledge. And at some point it came out that she had done that deliberately. We didn't talk about that early on.
I love it. Well, that gave her the confidence, real or imagined, to create an opportunity for herself.
Yes, exactly.
It's wonderful. So 10 years is a pretty big age gap, especially with you being younger.
Yes.
I think it's fabulous, but generally speaking, people don't go, with the male being younger and the woman being older. So did you realize at that point that she was that much older than you?
No.
Okay.
And I would almost or definitely not have started talking to her and taken her and suggested getting together if I had realized that she was 10 years older than me at that point. I actually had an issue with that when I found out. My father was much older than my mother, the more traditional relationship, but still he was 20 some odd years older than my mother. And when he turned 70, he started to age. It's as if his aging accelerated. And she was only 48. And they drifted apart. They broke up. It was very hard on both of them. It was hard on us kids.
Yeah.
A few weeks after I discovered that Lynn was 10 years older than me, I broke up with her. Because even though she was like the best thing that had ever happened to me, and I was more comfortable with her than I had been with my first wife, I was terrified that this was going to happen again, and that she was going to get old and die, and I might have to take care of her, and the idea freaked me out, and I broke up with her. And she was really pissed off at me. And about 4 days later, I called her up and said, I can't live without you. And she said, fuck you. But she did eventually allow me to start dating her again, provided I never talked about our age difference again. And of course, the irony of all of this is that the entire story of my book is about how she got cancer.
Yeah.
And I took care of her. And it was the most beautiful, meaningful, wonderful thing that ever happened in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so we can fast forward then. Well, how long till you guys got married? How long did you
We got married within about 2 years.
Okay.
And it's a telling anecdote. So Lynn and I were really not romantic, and we fitted each other very well in this way. Neither of us was interested in Valentine's Day, Cupid's hearts, red balloons, red roses, any of that kind of stuff. And here we were. We had been dating about a year and a half, and we decided to try and have a baby. We weren't married. We were hardly telling each other that I love you, but we were living together and deciding to have a baby. And one day, Lynn basically proposed to me by saying, your health insurance is much better than mine. and we need me to be on your health insurance before I get pregnant. Because back then in the 80s, pre-existing conditions would kill. You couldn't get onto a new plan. And pregnancy was a pre-existing condition. She would not be able to change plans once she got pregnant. So we got married. Now, this will come... I think we did love each other very much. But I want to set the stage here because this then changed 30 years later. So we got married. We did not have that child, although we tried. We never used birth control again. It's kind of a cool thing. When you're willing to have a baby, you can stop using birth control. But she was already 41, 42. They never found out why. It wasn't like she wasn't having healthy-looking eggs. But they never found out why. But what we started doing eventually was traveling like crazy. This is the opportunity we had because we weren't raising kids.
Yeah.
In terms of time, in terms of money, we were able to take multi-week trips to cool places that we never would have been able to do if we were having a family. So that was the trade-off in our life. And we spent a lot of wonderful time together having these adventures together, going places. India, Asia, places like that.
So cool.
Yeah. And I forgot if there was more to the question or if I should just stop here.
No, that's perfect. And Lynn was an artist.
Lynn was an artist.
As I'm seeing her, the existence of that all over your apartment.
Yes.
Was that her main, income-driven job?
If you can go through the word main, but you have to change the second half of the sentence. That's what she lived for.
Yeah.
That's what she had to do and did do all the time, and she was modestly successful in a field which, like so many other creative fields, only 1% actually can make enough money at it. And modestly successful does not mean you can support yourself, but it means she had a gallery, she had shows, paintings sold over the decades, she had some good reviews, she was a very, very good painter. And she had to have a day job. She had a part-time day job, and I was earning more, and I helped support this whole package, for which she many times said that she felt somehow guilty that because I was willing to use some of the money I earned basically to subsidize her not earning, she was able to paint. And I repeatedly had to say, no, this is I love this. What could be better than to be able to help you do this thing that both keeps you so happy, but creates these beautiful paintings that I love, love, love. So
I love that.
That's what we did.
That's hard too, because I think generally speaking, people want to consume art, but they don't want to pay for it. And I mean, that's a tale as old as time.
This is absolutely true. I'm thinking of books like mine.
Yeah.
Like podcasts like yours.
Yes.
It's totally true. And also Lynn loved painting still lifes. That is to say, objects on a tabletop. And the room we're sitting in, there's 8 of them around us. We're in my bedroom as we record this. Who would know that? Because that's where the air conditioning is best, and there's a heat wave out. But that's not a popular genre. So if she had painted, I don't know, pretty flowers, she would have sold a lot more, but she wouldn't have gotten the reviews that she got. She wouldn't have gotten the respect that she got. She was painting seriously good paintings in a genre that was out of style for most of the 20th century.
Yeah.
It's a little more back in now, but it's a little late for Lynn.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you or are you a creative?
I think I'm very creative and always have been. Although through most of our marriage, I was not doing things that the world sees that way. When she met me, I was a professional filmmaker.
Were you?
I was.
We should just have a separate interview about that, I feel like.
Yeah. And I mean, basically all through high school and college and my 20s, I was just seriously involved at one time or another in theater and film and writing stories.
Wow.
And writing poetry too. These are the things that fed me. I went to college, and it took me an extra year to get through college because I kept dropping courses because I was spending all day, all night in the theater working on shows. I did direct some, I did act a little, but mainly I was a lighting designer on shows, and I just loved it. Cool. But I also made movies, and I made several movies at college And then in my 20s, I fell into filmmaking full-time and made a series of films with other people. I mean, as part of a small company, made a series of films for colleges and universities to use for fundraising and recruiting.
Oh, cool.
And we were like really, really good at it. We won the awards for like Best College Film of the Year several years in that time. That's a small pond.
Yeah.
But we were and they're really good films. I found some, I got some of them digitized recently, and I love seeing them. Like, I was pretty good at that. But I didn't make any money at it.
Okay.
Like we were talking about in a different variant of what we were talking about. And eventually I fell in love with computers, which just became popular in the 80s with personal computers. I mean, we are talking about the late 70s into the 80s. That's when I was in my 20s. So by the end of the 80s, I had just found myself drawn to making software. And I did that. And I developed several programs, made a small company to sell a program I wrote to automate freelance for freelancers like me as a freelance. It's the software I wished I had as a freelance filmmaker.
Yes.
No, it didn't exist. So I taught myself programming, wrote it, formed a small company, and sold the thing.
Wow.
And did okay at that and loved it. And that is very creative. I mean, that was like you create the screens, the flow. You have to understand what people want to accomplish, and you have to create software that gives it to them.
Absolutely.
So I spent the next 30 years doing things that flowed from that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's an interesting dynamic, too. I mean, first of all, you're in right at the jump, right when computers and software and all of that is really getting its start. So that's fantastic, because so many people just fell behind when that started to pick up steam, right?
Yes.
But I think it's interesting because I believe creativity and art comes in all forms, right?
Yeah.
There's so many different ways to do it. And I think about jobs that are respected and people that are seen as contributing to society. And it's interesting that you say that, because software development is, in a way, like has become a mainstream, like accepted as a way to make good money, right? And so that's an interesting point of view, because I do believe that that's an art for sure. I mean, that's a difficult and
the aspects of it in which you get to design things.
Yeah.
There are whole levels and levels of it. It's sort of like the analogy of construction and building construction and architecture it holds true really well to software. So there are the people. There's the architect level who's working with the client and can start with pencil sketches, and that's so just obviously creative.
Yeah.
But then that gets translated into engineering drawings. And the engineer who gets to do the high-level design within that domain, I think, is being very creative, even though most of us wouldn't realize how that works.
Yeah.
And then somewhere down at the bottom, you get to the foot soldiers who have to take those drawings and apply the building codes and detail the specification for every little wire and pipe. That's not creative. That is a good-paying job in which you are implementing the creative decisions that were made that flow down to you. And a lot of those people are doing it in order to learn the craft and move into more creative positions, but not all.
Yeah.
Some people are very happy to have a paycheck, do something that helps make it be a good building, and go home at night and not have to lose sleep over it.
Yeah, work to live.
And so the same is true in software. There are analogs to all of these levels, and there are people who are writing code all day long. And actually, with code, I know more about code than I do about being a low-level architect doing the engineering drawings. In code, all the way down to the lowest level, there is a kind of creativity, if you're good, which is solving the coding problem in a way that feels clean, creative. You know your code is good when it is short and simple. You start out trying to solve a problem and you have pages of code that's hard to read and goes all over the place. You haven't actually solved the problem yet, even though it might run.
Yeah.
And you know that when it becomes what I'll call elegant, there'll be 1/10 as many lines of code as there were when you started. And it's beautiful. Now, AI is changing all of this because AI is able to write that level of code.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of programmers are losing their jobs because their companies are using AI to replace that level.
Yeah.
And that I find really depressing. But
I agree. AI terrifies me. I don't think we're afraid enough of it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're too comfortable with it already, and it's just begun.
Yes.
So, yeah. And again, you know, in any creative endeavor, I've seen people say, like, I don't want AI to write for me. I want AI to, you know, vacuum and pay my bills for me so that I can write. Like, you want something to replace the mundane, not the thing that gives you life.
Yes. Yeah.
So you guys get married.
We got married way back then, yes, and lived together 29
years. And so after 29 years, she was diagnosed with cancer.
Yes.
Now, how did she, what was the process there of even realizing something was wrong?
It started actually months before we knew it was cancer. We had, as I said, we had traveled all these places. And at that point, we hadn't traveled anywhere in a year or two. I had changed jobs where it wasn't possible for a while. But Lynn started having digestive issues, right? Various things. I mean, not any one. Just messing with her acid reflux, of course, constipation, diarrhea, either one. But just the acid reflux kind of thing was really bad. And she was just she was having trouble holding her food down and was losing her enjoyment in food, and she loved food. And after a while, it got bad enough that she started seeking, told her GP about it, and he sent her to various specialists. We all assumed when nothing turned up quickly in the scans, and nothing did. They were scoping her from the belly button down a lot. Every kind of invasive test and non-invasive test, she had them over those 6 months. And nothing turned up, and we were starting to think that it was like an amoeba or something that maybe she had picked up in India that had been lying dormant and was now really messing with her digestion, which happens. I've known other people for whom exactly that happened, and it's really tricky. Meanwhile, there was this tiny little knot of pain in her back that started as an annoyance and just was getting worse and worse while she was going to all these doctors, gastroenterologist kind of doctors, people like that. And eventually she started complaining, my back, I just can't. And all of her doctors said, that's what we call referred pain, which is a term I've learned. I've heard it used other times since then. Sometimes when you are experiencing something's going wrong, like in your leg or your torso, and you'll get this random pain elsewhere in your body that is just your nerves and your brain playing tricks on you. The real problem is here, but you're feeling a knot of pain there. But when you solve the real problem, the knot of pain goes away. So they were all fixated on the majority of her symptoms. They called it referred pain. But eventually a friend said, my son's a neurosurgeon and he looks at backs all the time. Maybe you should ask him. We wouldn't normally have jumped to a neurosurgeon, but it was like this friend, our friend's son. And Lynn went to him and he was very nice. And he said, I need to do an MRI. And on a Sunday afternoon, the next Sunday afternoon, we're sitting here at home and Lynn was on this bed over here from where you and I are sitting recording this, sketching Jack, our cat, because she no longer wanted to go out. She felt so crummy. And the phone rang, and it was our GP, the one who had referred her places, saying, Lynn, I have the report of your MRI in my hand, and you've got tumors in your lung and in your spine. And that is when everything changed.
I can't even imagine getting a call like that. I mean, I've certainly had tests done and, you're waiting for your test results. And I've been fortunate enough thus far to have never had the call come that it was anything serious.
Yeah.
Cancer is such a big, loaded word, too.
Yes. We were hoping, now I should say, this was not yet a diagnosis.
Okay. It was just tumors.
This is a radiology report that says there are masses, there's things that shouldn't be there in your lung and in your spine. And he may not even have used the word tumor. The radiology report uses some euphemism.
Oh, interesting.
And then it says, which might be this, that, or the other. This was a spine. They could see her spine clearly. And in her spine, they could see this is a tumor. There were 2 tumors in her spine.
Okay.
it wasn't a scan of her lungs, but the lungs were in the background. And the radiologist said, and I also see some things in the lungs that shouldn't be there. Maybe it's inflammation, maybe it's this, maybe it's that.
Interesting. So when you get the call...
We get the call, which blindsided us because none of us was expecting, this is like, I'll go to my friend's son to see, what's going on. But we totally did not think that back pain was serious.
Yeah.
It was the more significant thing, and it was.
Wow. And at the time when you got the call, though, were you thinking, like, this probably isn't, like, where was there fear there, or was it more of like a writing it off?
No. Once we got the call, we were stunned and scared to death. To which we reacted in different ways. But we were stunned and scared to death, and it was also a Sunday afternoon, and there wasn't a damn thing we could do about it. Our GP was saying, I recommend this oncologist. He's a friend of mine. I see him all the time. Call his office tomorrow morning to get an appointment. You need to see an oncologist right away. So we knew that.
Yeah.
And the expectation and fear was that she's got cancer, and it is either we didn't know enough. Lung cancer, does she have lung cancer? Does she have bone cancer, spinal cancer? We didn't know. And I started Google. First of all, she said, go swimming.
Okay.
Sunday afternoon is when one of the times we would regularly go swimming. Lynn wasn't feeling good enough to go swimming anyway, but she just basically said, let's not sit around here worrying all afternoon. Go swimming. It'll make you feel better. And, so I did. And of course I spent the whole time worrying. And I came back and started Googling every word that was used in that radiology report that we hadn't read, every word that Lynn had noted, scribbled down, or could recall.
Okay.
And pretty much everything I heard suggested this is probably stage 4 cancer.
Oh.
But maybe it wasn't. I was praying maybe it wasn't. And the next few days we had to wait, which was horrible because the oncologist didn't have an appointment until Wednesday. And that was Monday and Tuesday were the longest 2 days of our lives. I did go to work, but they were the longest 2 days of our lives because we, is there a chance? Is there a chance? Is there a possible good outcome? And then we walked in to see him, and almost the first thing he said is, I can't say definitively because there are tests we have to do. We have to do a biopsy to do this definitively, but I'll just tell you, you have lung cancer that has metastasized to your spine. I see this pattern all the time. It's very common. And apparently it's not common for it to go in the other direction.
Oh.
But you have lung cancer that has metastasized to your spine, which means you have stage 4 cancer. And we have to operate on that assumption. And then he just completely floored us by saying, but we can't treat the cancer first. We got to deal with that tumor in your spine because if it keeps growing, you're going to be paralyzed within a couple of weeks.
Oh, my word.
And so we started scrambling. In his office, he started making calls to line up an appointment with, of all things, a neurosurgeon. But the one that we had seen was way the heck out in Brooklyn, the one who was this friend's son, and we wanted to see a neurosurgeon who was plugged in with the same system as our regular doctor and all.
Sure. So scheduled the surgery?
We went to see him, and he said, yes, we're going to, but I don't recommend traditional surgery. There's new forms of radiation that are sort of like what we imagine from a James Bond film of a laser. It's like where they zap the tumors in your back. There were 2 of them actually. In 45 minutes, you'll receive your lifetime dose of radiation for that part of your body. But we hit it from many different angles. And the advantage over surgery is if we cut you open, it's a major operation, and it'll be weeks or months before you're going to be strong enough to start chemo for your lung cancer. Because this is like the side effect of the lung cancer. The thing in her spine wasn't the main problem, although it was going to paralyze her. The main problem was those 2 little tumors sitting in her lungs that had spun this off and were presumably continuing to send cancer cells out into her bloodstream looking for more places to go. So he said, if we do radiation, you'll be able to start treatment for the lung cancer much more quickly. And that's why we were recommending it. And that's what we eventually did. There were still tons of, it's like, we, as scared new cancer patients, are thinking every day counts. Oh my God, another day is ticking by. There were all these delays between then and when we could do the radiation, which amounted in looking back to 2 whole weeks, to only 2 weeks or 2 weeks. We had no idea that actually several months of delays lay ahead.
Oh, wow.
And it didn't make any, and that level of delay in this case made no difference at all. The cancer was not growing exponentially at that moment.
Yeah.
There was time, but as a scared to death cancer patient, every day we're imagining, oh my God, this, if we did wait one, it'll be too late. It'll break out more. The drugs won't be able to stop it.
Sure.
So that's those few months. First, we got the tumor, the spinal tumor zapped. Then we scrambled. We waited and waited and waited for the diagnosis, the biopsy. That took forever. And then our oncologist told us, oh, you're lucky. You're lucky because your tumors have a particular mutation that qualifies them for a new drug that's easier on your body than chemo. But meanwhile, another friend of mine had suggested that we get in touch with a friend of hers who's head of oncology at Yale New Haven Hospital, which is 2 hours from here. It's not convenient to here, but it's a really prestigious cancer hospital.
Sure.
So we said, let's get a second opinion. Mm-hmm. And we asked our own doctor about it, and he said, oh my God, that guy's famous. I've read all about him and the studies he's involved in. Maybe he'll get you onto one of the new immunotherapy drugs. If you can get onto the good stuff, that's what I would do. So we went up to New Haven, and which we had to wait weeks for, to see them. And then they offered a clinical trial that involved the immunotherapy drug as well as the drug Lynn was going to take anyway, which was like, this is like heavenly. Like, oh my God, we could take the proven one and also the other one. But when I say proven, the proven one meant that she might live 1.5 years instead of 6 months on average. Some people lived for years on it. Some people died in 6 months. The average was like 1.5 years. That's on the good, proven, targeted therapy.
Yeah.
Chemo was even worse. So we ended up discovering, and there's all these twists and turns. I write about all of this in the book, but it would tie us up in knots in this conversation. But this is like those first few months were like a spy thriller, like a thriller. I mean, I really felt that way. That it just every day there was another twist or turn and all of these delays, and we're scared the whole time. The end of the day, we were at Sloan Kettering, another world-famous cancer hospital, which is a subway ride from our house, not 2 hours away. And Lynn got into that clinical trial. And the immunotherapy drug plus the other one together added 5 years to her life.
Wow.
She lived 5 years, or 6 years before the cancer started growing again. They were not necessarily easy years, because the damage to her spine was significant. So even though these miracle drugs held the lung tumors down for the next 5 years, she had enough damage in her spine that she had multiple operations, one of which went wrong. She had sepsis. She almost died. She had delirium that lasted for months. This is the harder part of the story that I tell. Some people don't want to read it. It's like they say, too much medical stuff. But for me, that's one of the intrinsic parts of this. When you are living with a powerful disease like cancer and you haven't caught it until it's stage 3.5 or 4, somewhere in the 3 range, it's like really a problem. Mm-hmm. If you catch it in 1 or 2, we now have so many treatments. It's still scary as anything, and maybe the treatments won't work, but you have a chance of living 20, 30 years. Or longer,
right?
If you caught it early and it's something for which there's a good treatment. But once you get to the stage Lynn was at, this thing is aggressively attacking your body, and if you're holding it down with incredibly powerful drugs that themselves have incredible side effects, and that's so a good chunk of what I chose to write about was what it was like to live for those years, with these things going on in her body and with the fear and the knowledge that the cancer was going to beat the drug. They told us from day one, we're not going to cure this. There will be no remission.
Oh, interesting.
The best we can do, and the goal, is to give you more years of good life. We're not interested in giving you years when you are in such pain or tied to machines in such a way that you can't enjoy your life. We're interested in finding ways to extend your life That's the whole game. Find ways to extend your life in ways where you can enjoy it. Our definition of enjoy changed a lot because there are tremendous constraints. Her body had been changed dramatically by all of this. She was not willing to travel more than an hour away from her doctors because things repeatedly went wrong on a dime. I mean, vertebrae in her back would suddenly break.
Oh, my.
And this pain would start to happen.
Now, is that because of the radiation?
It's because of the radiation and the tumors.
Okay.
And the tumors were damaged. The fact of having a tumor grow into your spine, and she had 2 of them, will weaken that area no matter what. The radiation also weakens the area. And so, although we killed those tumors, and she never again, until the very end, she did have cancer in her spine at the very end. But for years, her spine was fine in that regard, but then the vertebrae started to break, and each one was horribly painful and required a procedure of one kind or another. Ultimately, she had a major operation where they put a rod in her back to stabilize her back. And that operation went wrong through no fault. I mean, I just want to say, this was at a world-class hospital with the director of neurosurgery there, spinal neurosurgery, doing the operation, and I love him, and something went wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them. It just, statistically, it happens. It happened to Lynn. So she had to have the entire operation repeated a month later after she almost died from the infection. And then she got major delirium, something called hospital delirium, that I also had never learned about, which can happen to people where it's like getting advanced dementia very quickly to your loved one. And she was terrified that she was losing her mind, and I was terrified that she was losing her mind, but I had to keep reassuring her that I was sure it would end because I had to give her reassurance. It was a very difficult journey. I feel like I've talked nonstop for about 20 minutes, so I need to pause and give you a chance.
It's your story. No, I mean, I just, I'm thinking about your day to day and how that must have felt to just, I mean, you kind of already spoke to the fact that, those 2 days you had to wait for your first oncology appointment. And, again, like you were saying, there's nothing wrong with this. It's just different perspectives, but an oncologist is doing this every day of their life.
Right.
It's not them going through it. There has to be at least part of desensitizing going on just because it's something you see day in and day out. And that's not to say anything that they don't have bedside manner or anything like that, but it's completely different being on the side of it's me or my family member, and I have no idea what tomorrow is going to bring.
Right.
So, you start going down this journey, and it's at first it's a rush, right? It's a sprint because you're trying to get to the finish line as quickly as possible.
Right.
And then you find out that there really isn't a finish line per se, at least not in the way that you were originally hoping.
Yes. So
how do you cope day in and day out, especially in the beginning, with this is our life looks completely different now. Like your life just changes overnight.
I think Lynn and I coped in different ways, and I'll plant the seed here. I had a little breakdown at the end of the first year because I actually was not taking care of myself enough. But that first year, which was by far the hardest year, and the 5 or 6 years were not all this hard. And there were, even within the first year, there were times which were like everything's cool. And the first time that happened, we thought we might have a long run. And then something went wrong just 2 weeks later, and we started to discover how fragile those good feelings were. But we were very different personalities, and I'm like the guy who likes to Google things, and I'm used to running big projects. Making a movie is a big project, and you plan the whole thing out and all of this. And so I was treating Lynn's cancer and the need to care for her as a big project. I immersed myself in the research, even though 90% of what I was learning might never apply to Lynn, but it made me feel good to learn everything I possibly could. And but we were both good at one step at a time. Because all you can really do, given all you can really do in life is one step at a time. And in our case, we had limited information. And at each stage, all we were trying to do was make the best possible choice for tomorrow or this week. To, what's the best thing we can do right now?
Yeah.
And let the future take care of itself. Lynn, that last part we both agreed on. But Lynn could not do the Googling and the research and things like that. Because the minute you do, you start reading stories of people dying.
Oh, yeah.
And she's the one who was going to die. But she was an artist. She loved to talk to her friends, communicate with her friends. We were very open with our friends. We started communicating right away. And this paid huge dividends for us in multiple ways. But she had me do the writing. We set up a CaringBridge site, caringbridge.org, which is a website for people to communicate with friends and family. And you could set up a private one. So we set up a private CaringBridge site, and we were writing posts. I wrote posts on there every time something happened. But Lynn didn't want to do the writing. She was willing to talk to her friends, but she didn't want to actually do the writing. And I should say, this was not only were the posts wonderfully helpful, and the support we got from our friends was wonderfully helpful, but the book Carrying the Tiger would not exist if I hadn't written those posts, because they became the journal that ultimately I worked from, that gave me the material and the memories which I've expanded on to tell the story some years later.
Yeah.
So it paid off again and again. But what Lynn did was read fiction that she could immerse herself in. When she was strong enough, again, paint her paintings, which is huge for her, huge, be able to have her art. Suddenly she wanted to cuddle on the couch in the evening and watch shows on Netflix. She always called all of that mindless entertainment and preferred to read. But now that she was under such stress and she was reading all day anyway, suddenly we were finding shows. And actually, we watched all of Breaking Bad, and I can't call that mindless, relaxing entertainment. But then we always would watch something else after it to calm down from it.
There you go.
It was that era of TV. But basically, all of these distractions, and she talked to her friends a lot, constantly on the phone. And then once she was strong enough to go out, she loved to go to the art openings and the gatherings that had always been the heart of her social community. And one of the beauties of the way we were communicating with these CaringBridge posts was that our friends didn't have to ask her what was going on with her cancer.
Yeah.
Because they had just been reading the posts. They might make some allusion to it, but they knew, because we even said in the posts what Lynn wanted to do in her life was act as if she didn't have cancer. Well, not denying it, totally living it. But she was able to have these wonderful interactions. So that is how, in a way, we coped. But there were so many treatments and hospitalizations and scary things going on that year. I still had a full-time job. I was very, very lucky in that the nature of my job was such I could do a chunk of the work at home or in a bed, in a chair at the hospital room or in other places like that. But I was getting exhausted. I was doing the job and researching at night and writing posts and trying to reassure Lynn. And that's how I ended up collapsing, sobbing, after about 11 months one day when things had gone all wrong that day. I had several major accidents, I should say.
Oh, wow.
I got so stressed and distracted that I started having these stupid big accidents because I was saying to myself, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this all the time. And actually I couldn't. So I collapsed.
Wow.
And sobbed and started telling her what I'd really been thinking the whole year. And this is something I really want to share with anyone who's listening to this. That whole year, while we were so open with our friends, we were open about Lynn. I wasn't sharing what I was feeling. I didn't have a therapist. I barely even really recognized what I was feeling. But two thoughts that have remained with me vividly because I told them to Lynn when I collapsed. One, sometimes I wish she would die sooner rather than later because this is really hard on both of us, and how long is this going to keep going on? Talk about a thought where you feel like you're betraying your loved one.
Sure.
I felt I could not share that with her. And the other, I really wish we could have sex the way we used to, because there had been so many changes to her body from the attack on her spine and the drugs she was taking that, yes, we were intimate. We did not stop being intimate, but we couldn't do the things we used to do. We had to find new things. And I really missed just being able to have sex without thinking about, oh, my God, I don't want to hurt you. Oh, my God, I don't want to hurt you.
Yeah.
And I hadn't shared that with her either. Because during that year, several times, she asked for reassurance that her cancer wasn't pushing me away, that all of the effort I was going through wasn't pushing me away. And the last thing I thought I could do was tell her or anyone else these kinds of unfaithful thoughts. I saw them as unfaithful thoughts that I was having. Not unfaithful like I wanted another woman, but unfaithful like
betrayal.
Betrayal.
Yeah.
Betrayal. So I collapsed, I sobbed, and for the first time that year, it was she comforting me. I mean, we'd had a long marriage. We had helped each other many times, but she comforted me. And it was just beautiful and said, I understand.
Yeah.
Oh, my God, this was such a relief. And she had a therapist and had one since long before. And she basically encouraged me to do the same, which I did.
That's great.
And then I could say those kinds of things to the therapist, who promptly reassured me that they were absolutely common kinds of feelings for a caregiver to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially a caregiver that is a spouse. There's different levels, I imagine.
Right.
It's you're not a son caring for a mother. It's a totally different relationship.
Yeah.
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 I think it's really interesting too. And I appreciate that you brought this up because you're kind of like an anomaly. You married a woman 10 years your senior, and statistically speaking, it's the men are more likely to leave their partners during a serious terminal illness.
Right.
Did that ever even cross your mind, or were you just like all in from the get-go?
This was what was so interesting. So I already told you about how 30 years earlier I broke up with Lynn because I couldn't imagine. I thought, oh no, she's going to become an old lady. She's going to age and become an old lady, and I will be repulsed or some other. I don't know quite. I imagined something like that.
Yeah.
And then I just she was so right for me. I lasted 4 days and I came crawling back. The reality is, absolutely, she started to look 5 years older than me, 10 years, which was her real age, but she's full of vivacity and had never thought of that. Then 15, then 20. Then she's looking like my grandmother because cancer, the photos of her towards the end of her life, some of which I put in the book so people would see this.
Yeah.
She's really like your 90-something-year-old grandmother, and she was in her early 70s at the time. And none of that mattered. Not for a second. I never thought about it. It was, the things I said are the kinds of things that mattered.
Yeah.
But I loved her, and she was still the same person. Sometimes those of us who are caring for friends or parents or whatever with various kinds of dementia, cognitive changes, we see personality changes that are really, really hard. And that is happening in my life now with one of my parents or my partner's parents. But that didn't happen with Lynn. Her body got attacked.
Yeah.
And eventually it went into her brain and she couldn't talk so well. And that's a kind of cognitive dementia. But she was still the same Lynn, and I loved her fiercely. And caring for her step by step gave me a depth of purpose in my life that I had never felt before.
Yeah.
This is what I was here to do. This is what I was born to do, to be able to help another person who I deeply love go through this. It made me feel wonderful about myself. And every time I was able to help Lynn, it just felt good to both of us.
Wow. That's pretty incredible, actually, I think. And I've not been in that position, in any sort of caretaking position. But I appreciate, once again, though, to your candor, that it can be both. You never faltered for a second. It never crossed your mind to leave. But you still struggled. It wasn't easy. It wasn't just I have all the energy and all of everything I need to do this and be a superhero. And
no,
that's not real.
That is completely not real. And there were times that I got angry at Lynn. I can't remember, 1 or 2 years in, possibly after the little breakdown, after I'd revealed all that stuff to her. But she was in the hospital. I think it was about 2 years in. She was in the hospital for what turned out to be an extended series of stays because she'd come home for a few days and then something else went wrong. And it was messing with her head. We were heading towards that hospital delirium. It was the early stages of it. So she started to lose track of what was really going on. Later, she would not understand that this was a hospital, not understand where I went. It got very hard. But I remember when she started insisting that I stay with her more and resenting that I left her side at the hospital, and I blew up at her. It was so hard.
Yeah.
I wanted so much to give her that. She did have other friends who would visit. I wasn't the only one.
Sure.
But I really wanted to give her that, and I couldn't. And she didn't get it. Why can't you stay? Oh, that's not important. Oh, that's not important. Why are you leaving? Later, when she had the delirium, it became, you don't really love me.
Oh.
If you really loved me, you would spend the night with me and be here in the morning. And I was already only getting 5 hours of sleep, and I needed to get home and feed the cat.
Yeah.
And maybe do the laundry and do some shopping and whatever the heck I needed to do. Not to mention occasionally working for my job and actually going in person.
Sure. And, sleep in a bed. I imagine you
and
didn't
sleep in
have
my
one
own
of
bed
those.
rather
Yeah.
than a chair.
Right. Yeah. That's hard long term.
It was very hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I try to imagine what, the fear, and her world got so small so quickly, and what that must feel like to just all of the sudden feel so helpless. And I have compassion for that. And, you're still a person who has needs and
absolutely,
needs to take care of themselves as well.
But I do want to say one of the other really interesting things, you said her world got so small so quickly. And in a way, that's absolutely true. From the spinal tumors, that was impacted her life right away. But in a much more meaningful sense, her world narrowed much more slowly than that, because we did get past those early hospitalizations. We did have multiple years after that where life felt really good to us. And one of the things I discovered, I think this may be analogous to what I just said about how her aging didn't matter to me. The world getting smaller didn't matter to us. We would acknowledge, we can't go on trips anymore. Oh, I kind of wish we could go on trips anymore. But we still had each other.
Yeah.
She could still see her friends. She was still making art. I actually did a really big creative project at work, designing an entire software system and such for several years during the middle of this. Very, very creative stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could only go so far as Western New Jersey. That's the furthest we were willing to go, and where we used to travel so much more. But you know something? She was alive. We had each other. We had so much love and life and art and joy during those years. I think it's really important that to say part of learning to live with something like this is finding your way to continue to experience the joy that's around you and the beauty that's around you. And you really do. I mean, my gosh, we appreciated the beauty of nature and all more than we ever had.
Yeah.
You appreciate being alive more than you ever did.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. I mean, to your point, when you don't have the access necessarily physically to a lot of things, you have to take notice in a different way.
In a different way.
Yeah.
And when when you are aware of the time limit that hangs over all of us, that mostly we deliberately ignore.
Sure.
We go through. I'm kind of not thinking that. I'm not thinking the same way now that I did at the height of Lynn's cancer.
Yeah.
And yet, of course, it has changed me. And yes, I am much more aware of the beauty of nature. I stop and notice, and I just stop and go, oh, let me take in the fact that I'm alive. Let me take in the fact that this is beautiful around me, that even being alive is a miracle.
Yeah.
I do that I don't think I ever did that once before Lynn's cancer. And I do that every now and then now. It just happens.
Yeah. That's all. To be able to take something like that from this experience, I imagine, is rewarding in a way, because it is a kind of gift. And so you can tie it directly to that experience, and you can say that even though this was hard, the hardest thing I've done probably and been through, I have this from it, and it's a wonderful thing in my life.
Absolutely. I do really think that the whole 10 years changed me in many ways for the better. It was the hardest thing I've done in my life, and we haven't even gotten to the hospice. Helping her die was the most beautiful and rewarding thing I ever did in my life, even though the end of it was her dying.
Well, how long was she on hospice?
Only 2 weeks.
Okay.
Things had been going wrong for about a year and getting worse and worse, and we kept trying things and thinking, okay, maybe this will work, maybe that'll work. We tried another clinical trial. It isn't easy. I'm pausing because my experience is my experience, and I should say for us, and I think for many people, but certainly not everyone, going through aggressive cancer. Eventually, the cancer beat the drugs, and it was very much as if we had never had miracle drugs, as if we were starting over.
Oh, wow.
And unless we found a different miracle, Lynn was going to die in a year and a half, something like that. But the year in which the cancer slowly started to break out from the drugs, it's only in hindsight that I can say, oh yeah, that's the day Lynn started to die, quote unquote, which is an arbitrary choice, because you could pick any moment in your life and say that.
Sure.
But at the time, like one tumor started to grow, so they said, okay, well, we'll radiate that one tumor in her lung, I should say, not the spine. They couldn't radiate her spine anymore. But we'll give her radiation of this one tumor in your lung, we'll kill that one tumor, and maybe that's the only one that knows how to beat the drugs, and the others will just hang out and can. So we tried that, but then she had side effects from the radiation, and it was during COVID, and she had a kind of pneumonia and had to be hospitalized. It was a very hard year. But it wasn't until September, October. It really did start in January. I mean, that moment that things started to go wrong was, in fact, right around January 1st. But it wasn't till August, September that it was clear that there were now tumors, like lots of them, going into her bones, her hip bone, places like that. We tried another clinical trial of another miracle drug into October, November, December, and it kind of had what they called mixed results. So that's not a clear result. You keep trying, you keep hoping, well, maybe this is such a brand new drug. Maybe next month its cumulative action will cause things to get better.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the pain is going up, the horrible experiences are going up. And I do write about those in the book. I wanted to share that, but I also try and do it in like 5 pages rather than 100.
Yeah.
It got really, really hard. So eventually there was a day when we came back from a terrible day, and the neurosurgeon's office called up to say, we have the radiology report from this morning, and the tumors have gone into your brain. We think you should come back tomorrow and start intensive radiation on your brain. We need to slow these things down. And I just want to say, I love these guys. But a surgeon is a surgeon. Their view of you is to fix you. This is my generalization. Lynn hears this, and she's thinking fuzzily, which I had assumed was because of the pain, and now they tell me there are tumors in her brain.
Yeah.
And she said, I can't go back to the hospital tomorrow. I can't. I need at least a few days at home. And the woman on the phone from the neurosurgeon's office sounded very disappointed, but said, okay, of course, I understand. I'll schedule you for Thursday. A few days later. And we hung up, and we're sitting there, and I, to my endless shame when I look back, tried to talk her into going into the hospital to have that radiation. Maybe it'll give us a little more time. Maybe it'll give you a little more strength. Time for that drug to work. That kind of thing. Because I didn't want to lose her.
Yeah.
And I later read in the book Being Mortal, which is a wonderful book, that this is kind of common for the family members to try and talk the cancer patient into continuing treatment. I don't know whether I would have succeeded, but then the phone rang again, and it was our oncologist, whom we'd been with at Sloan Kettering for 6 or 7 years, who said, I'm looking at this report, and the tumors are all over, and maybe it's time to say enough is enough. And I'm starting to cry right now as I say that. The most beautiful gift, because to get permission from your doctor to say, you should consider stopping now. Then he went on to say, if you go back into the hospital tomorrow, you'll probably never come out. We'll keep radiating, but the tumors have exploded. If you want to die at home, now is the time. And Lynn said, yes, let's stop. I haven't cried over this in a long time. You know, we'd been working for 6 or 7 years to keep her alive as a pair.
Yeah.
And that was the night we said, it's not working anymore. It's time to stop. And it turned out she died only 2 weeks later. We spent those 2 weeks here. And she died in the room we're sitting in recording this. And as I said, I was given a gift to be able to be with Lynn intensively for those 2 weeks, 23 hours a day, except when I took a walk, do a little shopping and get a little exercise, no swimming, no serious exercise. It was during COVID anyway. All those things were shut down, I should remember. And for the first part of that time, she was still talking. The tumors eventually did take away her ability to say more than a few words at a time. And at the very last day or two, she was just whispering things I couldn't understand. But we got to have these amazing conversations. What did we think was going to happen? What did we want to have happen? What was going to happen to me? She gave me permission to have another girlfriend, her phrase. And I was able to give her love and hold her hand and communicate with her and know that she loved me and I loved her and ease her pain. Yeah, we did get AIDS. It became way too much for me to do on my own.
Yeah.
But I was here with her right to the end.
Yeah. And she was comfortable in her space. She
was comfortable. She was in her space. And she said something right at the end that I found so meaningful. It was only so like 2 days before she died, her last complete sentence, maybe it was one day, and the only complete sentence or two that she had said that day, it was the last time I tried to give her little drops of water. We were no longer giving, she was no longer drinking any significant amount. She was no longer eating. We were down to dissolving the pills in water. She wasn't taking bites of even applesauce. So we're really close to the end. Not that I knew exactly that, but I was still squirting little bits of water into her mouth from a pipette. And she closed her mouth and shook her head and said, "Leave me alone. I've got a lot to do." At that point, she was spending the whole day lying on her back, looking at the ceiling or with her eyes closed. But her perception of what was going on in the last days of her life was, I've got a lot to do.
Yeah.
Which is this amazing mystery. Lynn and I are not religious, don't believe in any organized religion, and therefore don't believe in formal heaven. But also, we were totally open to the question of, we don't know what death is. We don't know if your spirit, your soul, something continues on. We don't know what your experience is, and we're not assuming anything in particular.
Yeah.
So whatever the heck goes on in the last days of your life, if you're lucky enough to be able to fade out like that, is kind of beautiful. And I think she was somewhere she liked being.
Yeah, that is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost a different state of consciousness at that point.
Yes.
Yeah. I feel like people that maybe haven't been through something like this, watching a loved one over time pass, have this feeling that they don't want to, because they don't want to have a disrupted view of that person in their mind. And I was at my grandfather's side, one of my grandfather's side, when he physically passed.
Yes.
And I don't regret it. I'm so glad I was there.
Yeah.
And while I can still vividly remember that, it's not the memories that come up when I think of him.
Exactly.
So can you speak to that? Because I think people may, put up walls and barriers that they don't have to, because they assume that it's almost a trauma that they're never going to be able to escape.
Wow. Before all of this, I had been with my father when he died and my older half-brother when he died. Both times, both in hospitals, but both times I and others were literally in a circle around them at the moment they died. And I already knew that those were two of the most beautiful experiences of my life.
Yeah.
I loved my father deeply. Didn't know my half-brother as well, but liked and loved him a lot. It completely did not change my memories of my father, my feelings of my father, and it was not a traumatic experience. Obviously, if you're there when your loved one has a traumatic death, there are many. We can imagine many scenarios in which a death can leave you traumatized.
Sure.
But being with someone when they die in hospice or when they die peacefully in a hospital is beautiful. It's like the analogy is to birth. It felt as special to me sharing that time, feeling their pulse stop, feeling the body change, and that they were gone now. The soul, the spirit leaves, regardless of what we believe. You now have a body rather than your loved one. Not only did it not traumatize me, it gave me this beautiful sense that I had been there to help.
Yeah.
And the knowledge that it was peaceful.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I can only speak from my own experience, to be sure, but the doctors and nurses, and he was at home, in hospice at home when it happened, but the doctors and nurses said, he's not aware of anything and whatever. And while I absolutely trust them, there was for sure a part of me that was like, well, you don't know that 100%.
You totally don't know that. And I think
I don't want him to be alone.
No. And I think that I will guess that all of us who've accompanied a loved one through those last days of their life refuse to believe what the scientists tell us.
Yeah.
And that's based not only on a desire and love, but also on the reality of what we experienced. Lynn interacted with me, on her last day, although she could not talk, we still had to roll her over, me and the aide, to change her diaper and wipe her and make sure that she was comfortable and prevent bed sores and things like that. And that was a complicated process. She had a broken neck at the time and was wearing a brace to hold it in place. And so rolling her, moving her could cause a lot of pain. We had upped the pain meds at her request while she could still talk. She controlled that. She said, I want more. A day or two before, maybe 2 days before. And it no longer seemed to cause pain. But you could feel her cooperate in it. We weren't moving a dead weight.
Yeah.
We were moving someone who knew that we were trying to help her.
Yeah.
And she rolled onto her side and I held her. And then the aide changed her diaper or whatever, and then we rolled her back. And at the last hour or 2 or 3 of her life, she was just lying there looking up at the ceiling as I had conversations first with the aide and then on speakerphone with my sister beside her. And I can't say that she gave any indication that she could hear those conversations, even though just a few hours before I knew that she was cooperating and helping in the rolling over. So it wasn't days when she wasn't with me. But I had these wonderful, interesting conversations, and my sister and I, by coincidence, because I didn't know Lynn was about to die that minute, talked about our happy childhood and shared stories when we played together, which Lynn got to hear, which is sort of wonderful. And then I said, I need to put my dishes in the kitchen. I'd eaten my dinner on a tray on my lap next to Lynn. And I got up and walked in the kitchen. I was in the kitchen maybe a minute, and I thought, I want to check on Lynn. And when I came back, she had died.
Oh, wow.
So I thought, oh, wow, because I had really wanted to be with her at the moment she died, as I had been with my father and my half-brother. And I put a note on caring, and so I wrote our friends, Lynn has died, that night. And I told about that, and I said, I've heard this is common, but maybe that's just an old wives' tale. And I was inundated with responses from my friends saying, no, that happened to my mother, that happened to this person, that happened to that person. It is apparently, anecdotally, very common for the loved one, the dying person, to wait until that tiny moment when the people who love them are not there and say, that's it, I can go now.
Yeah.
I can go now. As opposed to they're holding my hand, stroking my hand, when you kind of don't want to. This is how I internalize it. But I'm also willing to believe that it was just a coincidence.
Sure. Yeah, but I do think, those beliefs don't really hurt anybody. And so if it gives us some semblance of comfort, then absolutely go keep going with that.
Yeah.
Because I've heard the same things, and I think there's a beauty to that, right? That because in a way, it's almost like this person that you've been caring for however long is trying to return the favor by making sure that you don't witness that last breath, right?
Or maybe they feel, because I don't think she would have worried about my witnessing the last breath since she had been there when my father and my brother died and had seen how beautiful it was. But there's some way in which she, as long as I'm there, her love for me, whatever, was tying her to me. And I needed to just give her a moment when I wasn't there to remind her of what she'd be losing, maybe.
Sure.
Since what she had said was, I'm going to miss you and I'm going to miss the cats.
Yeah.
A week or two earlier when
Right.
we talked about it. Of course, we don't know what it's really like and whether you do miss.
Right.
But that's what she said.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, hey, yeah. I mean, I've heard along the same lines of people, giving their loved ones permission, you know? And
I totally gave Lynn permission. It was actually hours earlier when I thought she was dying, and I thought I heard what I imagined was
But it
the
was
death,
that day.
the rattle breathing. It was earlier that day.
interesting.
And she was, her breathing became labored and weird and stuff. And I hadn't read books or anything about it, but I had kind of remembered, okay. And it felt like, this is it. And I started stroking her head and saying, it's okay. It's okay. You can go now, my love. It's okay. Just saying, my love. I want to share with the listeners what we haven't gotten to yet, which is that I'm in a happy relationship now. Lynn died 4.5 years ago as we record this, and I'm crying talking about it. And the grief never goes away. You just learn to have a life around it, and it gets smaller. But this happens. Something comes up, like being asked to talk about those wonderful moments in Lynn's last days. She's still totally in my heart, and it doesn't mess up my ability to keep living and keep loving. And it wasn't easy getting here these last 4 years. That's what I assume we'll talk about next. And I don't really want to jump past how beautiful those last weeks of Lynn's life were. But I still cry for her occasionally out of the blue, not just when asked to talk about her dying.
Yeah.
That she's in me. My love for her, my grief for her, they stay. You never get past it. You just learn to live with it. That's like jumping ahead to what I want people to know.
No, I think that's so important because I imagine there's a sense of guilt associated with almost like a survivor's guilt of they're gone and I'm not.
Yes.
And I can't stay in this place forever. She's stopped in this moment in time.
Yeah.
And I have to keep moving forward.
Yeah. but you sure as hell don't think you can at first. And so I do want to not skip forward. So Lynn died.
Yeah. And
my sister and her husband came in that night like, you can't be alone when they take the body. It's so beautiful. And the undertakers came. They took Lynn away. And I now know, because I've learned a lot more about grief recently and subsequently than I knew then, that it's common that after your beloved dies, you experience you go into a kind of shock where everything seems like you're going to be able to deal with this. Like, okay, I can deal with this. Okay. And I also consciously thought, wow, we did it. We did this beautiful death. Everything was great. I helped her. She knew I loved her. Maybe I'll be spared that shattering grief that I've heard about. And about a day later, on came the shattering grief. And that lasted for a shorter time than most people, but months and months. And many, many people, the shattering, discombobulating, non-linear, confusing, sneaky grief, where you go through periods where you literally can't get anything done, you can't think. Wait a minute, I was just cleaning the house. I could swear I was vacuuming this morning, but now the vacuum cleaner is sitting over there, and I must have stopped at some point without finishing, and I never put it away, and I totally don't remember, and it just goes on and on like that. And then there are days or hours when it recedes. You have a good day, you have a good half day, you're able to deal with the lawyer and those kinds of things. And in the early days, I would start thinking, okay, this is it. Now it's lifting now. And then like the next day, you're plunged back in, can't stop sobbing. I wish I had died with you. This is unfair. This is horrible to be left here alone like this. All of that happened to me, just as some version of it happens to many, many people. Everyone's grief is different. And some people, it isn't debilitating, and some people are still feeling stuck. I don't want to apply the label to them, but feeling stuck 2 years out. But about 2 months after Lynn died, I sent some emails to invite some people to Lynn's Zoom memorial that we were going to hold. This turned out, COVID was good for one and only one thing that I'm sure of, which is that it taught me and many people the value of a Zoom memorial, which I think was even better than the in-person memorial that we would have had. 4 times as many people came.
Wow.
They could all speak. They were all over the place, you know?
Yeah.
And they could all speak at the time when it was open for speaking, and everyone could hear them and see them, and it was wonderful. Okay. But I was inviting people, and one of the people I invited was a woman whom I'd known as children, and I had known her father reasonably well. He was one of Lynn's doctors, worked near here. We had had dinner with him and his wife several times. When he died, his family had invited Lynn and me to their Zoom memorial just a few months earlier. So I returned the favor by inviting them to Lynn's Zoom memorial, even though none of the people I was inviting had ever met Lynn. But I basically said, look, the Zoom memorial you did for Kitty was so meaningful to me. It's part of the reason I realized that these things can work, and I'm going to do one for Lynn. And if you'd like to attend, please feel free to do so. And I get an email back from this woman named Cordelia saying, oh, thank you so much. The fact that Kitty's memorial was meaningful to you means a lot to me. Here's a poem that we had at her memorial. Maybe you'd like to use it at Lynn's. And I wrote back, thank you. But Lynn and I picked a poem, actually, by E.E. Cummings, I Carry Your Heart, I Carry It in My Heart. It's one of the world's great love poems. And Cordelia wrote back to me, oh, dear, dear Tony. I just want to pause here for a second. I did not know her. Oh, dear, dear Tony, that poem means a lot to me. My husband of 30 years and I had it read at our wedding, and he's just told me he's leaving me.
Oh. I
can't remember what else was in that email. but I was touched and also so attuned to grief and grieving people. And aside here, one of the things that I found, and I think it's very common when you're grieving, when you're in deep grief, you glom on to other people who you know are experiencing deep grief because most of your friends don't know what it feels like.
Yeah.
Here was someone in deep grief who wrote a really lovely email. I wrote her an email back saying, oh my gosh, that's like losing Lynn. You're losing your husband. She said, yes, we're losing our dreams, my dreams of growing old together. They're now gone. Mm-hmm. We started corresponding. Then we moved to phone calls. Then we moved to video calls. And before the video calls, during a phone call, when I still only knew what her Facebook pictures looked like, and there weren't very many of those, she stopped in the middle of a sentence and said, Tony, are you feeling what I'm feeling? Because I've got a big crush on you. From talking about grief and our feelings.
Yeah.
And I had a big crush on her too. Which I have since learned, it is actually kind of common after you lose your partner to feel sexually attracted to other people relatively quickly. I can't say that my crush on Cordelia was sexual.
Yeah.
I wasn't at all. It was a kind of a emotional crush. Mm-hmm. But I've understood since then that actually it's common for all the reasons you can imagine, especially if you haven't been able to be physically intimate for a long time as your partner was dying or declining. You know, it's like you yearn for being held again. Mm-hmm. Sex, who cares? You yearn to be held again and to have that kind of intimacy. And then that causes all kinds of problems because if people run around and have one-night stands and then they feel horribly guilty. That is not the story I'm telling here. But Cordy and I were attracted to each other, and we soon started talking about getting together. She lived in Minneapolis. I live in New York City.
Okay.
1,200 miles away. But she has family on the East Coast and planned to come to the East Coast like the next month. And so we made plans to get together. And it was pretty clear by the time she got here from our conversation that unless something amazing messed us up, we were going to fall into bed together.
Yeah.
Which we did. And I vividly remember being on that bed right there, making out with Cordy, and realizing there was Lynn's urn sitting on the dresser. I'm pointing over your shoulder as we record this. There was Lynn's urn sitting there, and I felt like Lynn was watching us. And it didn't matter that Lynn had given me permission to someday have another girlfriend. Here I was cheating on Lynn, about to have sex in a relaxed way with no physical complications, except for the minor matter of not knowing this woman and the stuff that always happens when you start being intimate with someone for the first time.
Sure.
But still, I felt horribly guilty. And meanwhile, Cordy and I are kissing and starting to touch each other. Oh my God. And I had to just bury that thought. I could have gone two ways. I could have said, I can't do this, and gotten up from the bed. But I really wanted it. Mm-hmm. And I really loved what I already knew about Cordy, which is that emotionally we were so connected. And she was saying these really healing things to me, and I wanted that. So, of course, we made love. And it turned out that sex between us was good, which doesn't always happen with people.
Sure.
So for the next 2 years, I wrestled with trying to build this relationship with Cordy while periodically pushing her away because she wasn't Lynn. I wasn't as comfortable with her as I was with Lynn. And I felt guilty and ashamed and cheating and all of these things. And this actually went on for 2 years. I mean, she didn't live here, right? She would come through New York, go away. I did go to Minneapolis and visit her there. We were spending more and more time together and having a great time when we did, except when we didn't. Yeah. And suddenly I'd be cold to her. And luckily, she was brave enough to stop me and say, what's going on? I feel like you've been distant for like days. It would take a couple of days. And I would admit, yeah. The spark isn't there because I'm feel like I'm cheating on Lynn. I feel like, how do I reassure Lynn that I still love her when she can see us doing this? And of course, like I said, I don't really believe in a standard heaven. But you better believe when your loved one dies, and I bet this is virtually universal, you want to believe that they're still there.
Sure.
You want to believe that they're with you and aware of you for a while at least. I also want to believe that Lynn was having new experiences and not stuck doing nothing better than watch me for the next 5 years.
Yeah.
But it was very complicated. And that's what the last part of Carrying the Tiger tries to talk about, is that, and also just the general of what was it like to climb out of the shattering grief and to try to, and then eventually reach the point where I could look at photos of fun things, times that Lynn and I had together, and not just sob for half an hour over one photo after another, which was what it was like when I was getting ready for the memorial and choosing photos for the slideshow. Like, oh my God, what a cry fest. Every one of them is a memory. And eventually, I reached the point, as friends who had been down this road ahead of me assured me would eventually happen, and I held on to that assurance. I clung to it. I reached the point where looking at those photos did make me smile. That is what you hope for.
Yeah.
Except occasionally when I cry.
But that's
it's just
healing, I think.
It's healing, and it's also showing me that what I most fervently want is still true.
Yeah.
I still love Lynn. She's still in my heart. And if she's listening and watching, she can know that I haven't betrayed her in that way. I'm doing exactly what she wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. How, so Cordy was going through her own thing at the same time, while very different in what she was going through, it still was grief, which is your original connector.
Yes.
So how did she walk through that with you? I'm sure it was hard for her at moments, just like it was hard for you. Mm-hmm. But you guys are still together, so clearly something's working for you.
The single biggest thing that Cordy did for me, and I assume it was out of instinct, I've since then taken a whole course to become a certified grief educator. That's very recent in my life. And the thing they drum into you again and again and again is the most valuable thing you can do is A, just listen, and B, ask about the person they lost and give them an opportunity to talk about the person they lost. That's what Cordy did. From the very first conversation, she's like, "You're crying all the time for Lynn. Tell me about Lynn. Who was Lynn?" And she got me to talk about Lynn. So not only was she not implying that it was either her or Lynn, that I had to make some kind of choice, she was giving me the best possible grief therapy that there is, which is to just give me space to cry and talk about what it was like to be with Lynn and who she was as a person and what I had lost.
Yeah.
And Cordy did the same for me. Now, it's not an exact reversal.
Yeah.
Having your husband tell you that he no longer wants to be in a marriage with you is a completely different experience in that aspect.
Sure.
Than losing your husband, to illness, death, something like that. So but she did tell me about what her life had been like, and we talked a lot about that.
Yeah.
I can't really speak entirely for Cordy as to how she made it through those 4 years to now. And we're still very much together now. Yeah. We literally just came back from the wedding of her son.
Oh, lovely.
Just this last 3 days. And we danced and I cavorted with all of these relatives I now have. Cordy and I have not married, but we may never get married. That's not an important thing at this point in our lives, but we're very much a couple.
Yeah.
But back then, I kept coming back to, okay, we're having really fun sex, which I had really missed, and we're having really great emotional, low-end conversations, and where everything was going wrong was in the middle, was just the normal, small getting through the day, where she would, especially in that first year, constantly do things that annoyed me. Like anything that wasn't the way Lynn would have done it.
Yeah.
Basically, if I want to summarize it, looking back.
Sure.
But of course, that's not how it felt. Like, why are you doing this way? Why are you doing this that way?
Yeah.
And I kept trying to hold myself back from saying that kind of stuff. But I was really encouraged by some of my Indian friends. Remember, I traveled to India a lot. I have various friends, most of whom I met originally here, Indian Americans, but they introduced us to their families there. Ton of arranged marriages. Mm-hmm. And I learned that an arranged marriage, which seems to work every bit as frequently as a love marriage, statistically, they work every bit as well. It turned out that one of my best friends, whom I had known in this Indian friend, and I know her, and I know her husband, and I know the kids she's raised, and it's a very loving marriage. It was an arranged marriage. And the deal is, you find someone who you and your family, if it's a good arranged marriage, you get some say in it. It's not just your mother telling you.
Yeah.
That's the way it used to be. You find someone who you and your family feels is a pretty good fit, based in large part on their family and the way they live their life and the people around them, because it's going to take the two families to help you weather all of the storms that come in any marriage. And again, they told us that over time, this passionate, deep, I don't want to say passionate, deep love grew. I can't speak to what kind of love. Just like one would hope with a love marriage. And I repeatedly said to Cordy and tried to convince her, look, this is what we've got. We've got this out at this end, we've got that out at that end, and we've got a willingness to stay together and learn to work out the muddle in the middle. And the first time I told, and just like our Indian friends, and the first time I told her that, she didn't seem too convinced. But I really think that's what's happened.
Yeah.
We made a commitment, not a marriage vow, but at some point we just said, we each said to the other, I really want to try to make this work. Mm-hmm. To spend the time together and to talk about what was going wrong in the middle. And we each adapted our patterns. And I learned Lynn had this really easy, light, quick sense of humor. Cordy does not. She has many, many other strengths. And this was part of what had attracted me to Lynn. And Lynn got my quick, light, deadpan jokes. And Cordy thought I was being serious. Mm. So a sense of humor mismatch is actually often a deal breaker for a relationship.
Sure.
But here we had this other stuff going, and we have learned each other's sense of humor. It isn't the easy, relaxed thing I had with Lynn, but when she doesn't get what I'm intending as a joke, I just stop and say, oh, that was one of my jokes. And when she does her version of that on the other way and it doesn't work for me, we just stop and say, right, that's what's going on. And it becomes a kind of comfort and familiarity.
Yeah.
That is our relationship.
Yeah.
And now we're having a very good time.
Do you think that you would have approached this the way that you have had you not walked through what you did with Lynn, in terms of you carried so much in that relationship, and you really got to see what testing a boundary of a relationship would look like in a way that a lot of people don't have to walk through. Mm-hmm. And so your commitment to, this is kind of just the middle stuff. Like, it's not a deal breaker. Do you think you would have felt the same way had you not been walked through your previous experiences?
I couldn't possibly have fallen into a relationship with Cordy if it had not been coming off of my grief, connecting the way we did, and exactly what you just said, my sense of like, this is really important and that's really important. We can work the rest out. Yeah. The other thing I came off of was a 35-year relationship in which Lynn and I had worked our stuff out. My first 10 years with Lynn, I would say, like anyone's marriage, of course, I don't know everyone's marriage, but yeah, we had this wonderful quick attraction. Yes, I was quite convinced when I broke up with her and then came crawling back that I absolutely wanted to spend my life with her. She made me feel relaxed and happy in a way that no one ever had. But then we had all kinds of arguments and bad times and things, and spend about 10 years working that out. And then there's that magic moment when you realize you haven't had a serious fight, or we realized we hadn't had a serious fight in a long time. Couldn't quite remember when the last one was. It had turned into bickering. And bickering is my term for a game that a couple plays. When you pretend to be carrying on the kind of argument that used to be real, but now you're each just staking out. It's almost like an acting thing.
Yeah.
And we would have fun bickering with each other over something, and it was just a part of what bound us together.
Yeah.
And so the last 20 years was this great relationship, but I knew this was all in my past, in my learned history, my lived history, how important the deep connection was, and how you can, simply by making the commitment to spend the time together and talk it out and talk to each other about what's really going on between you, you can work out the middle stuff if you really want to be together.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you've mentioned several times your book.
Mm-hmm.
When did you decide to write about this experience?
I had been writing about it through those CaringBridge posts all the way along.
Yeah.
And I think this is really important because this is like the journey that leads to the book.
Yeah.
So I had been writing about it all the way along with no expectation that this would ever be shared with anyone other than the close friends who were reading CaringBridge. When I started writing, they were very factual. I got more and more emotional as I went along, meaning sharing what it was like to the experience of living with cancer, the drudgery or the fear. But still, it was sort of more like this is going wrong or this is going right. But then you get to hospice, and I kept writing through hospice. In fact, I felt compelled to write almost every night. There may be a post literally every night of those 2 weeks, which is more often than I had written in the previous years. I'd sort of stopped writing for a few years when things were good, because it was a way of letting my feelings out. And all I was doing was talking about the mystery and miracle of what each day was like. And I got comments back. Thank you, thank you, thank you for sharing this. This means so much to me. Just lodge that there. Then she died. And I wrote a post saying, basically, I guess this is the last post. It's the Lynn Kotula CaringBridge Journal. I mean, that literally was its name. Lynn has died. It didn't matter that I had written most of it. And 2 days later, when the grief hit, I felt compelled to write another post. And I started sharing what the grief felt like. And this was like therapy. There's no other reason for me to have done this other than therapy. I'd even signed off.
Yeah.
And people continued to write back, thank you. Reading about your grief and what it feels like is really helping me. So that is when the seed was planted, that maybe what I was writing had something special that would work for people, that would be helpful to people other than my immediate friends. Okay. Lynn died. I got through my grief. I started thinking about what to do with all of this. That summer, so 6 months after Lynn died, I printed out all of CaringBridge as it existed then, thinking, I'm going to look at this. I'm going to start dealing with this. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. It was just too painful, and I couldn't figure out what. I mean, it was too much. There were hundreds of pages. I knew I had to edit it down. All I thought I was going to do was edit it down, and I couldn't do it. And I put that box of stuff, which was then 600 pages of printout in a corner, including the comments.
Okay.
Probably about 400 pages of my writing, 400 pages of my writing, and several hundred pages of comments.
Wow.
Stuck it in a box, which I sort of kicked around for the next 4 years. And then eventually reached a point after we had dealt with all of the... I had put on a show for Lynn, a retrospective gallery exhibition for Lynn. We had done a catalog of her work. I was the mover and shaker and financier for all of this, so that we sold a lot of paintings. I actually did get the money back. And most importantly, placed her paintings in the world, because what you don't want, and happens to so many artists, is you end up with a basement full of paintings that no one ever wants.
Yeah.
And then eventually we sold her painting studio, which actually was a tiny co-op apartment that she and a friend had bought when it was abandoned by the landlord, and the city sold it to them for $250, which is how we came to own 2 apartments in New York City. That was from when the city was like on fire and in terrible shape. So I had done all those things. And then literally the day after we closed on the sale of Lynn's apartment, I started working on the book. I just thought, I need to do this. And that was like 4 years almost after she had died. And I started by completing the editing job, which took a couple of months. And I thought I had finished. For about a day, I thought I had finished. Until I realized that simply editing all of these posts to a readable length, removing the redundancy, and putting little connectors between to explain a little bit of what they didn't say would only ever be meaningful to our friends, because why are you going to read this? You didn't know who we were as people. This was written to people who knew us. So I didn't bother explaining who we were or why you might care. And I certainly left a lot of things out. I then spent a year going from there to the Carrying the Tiger that exists now, which there are a lot of quoted posts in it, all of which have been edited down to a more brief and non-redundant length. But I would say 2/3 of it is fresh writing, and 1/3 of it is the posts.
Yeah,
and at least 1/3 of it is stuff that no one knew from reading the posts, like my breakdown.
Yeah,
just things that were really important to what was going on. Oh, plus I tell the story of how we met at the swimming pool and things like that.
Yeah,
because I want you to understand who we are, and why would you read about all the hard stuff if you don't know and care about us as people? So
Sure.
I tried to do that. And it ended up being like a proper memoir as opposed to a journal.
When you finally sat down to write do your year of writing, did you find catharsis in it? Or, because you had struggled before and there was a time where you couldn't even look at it. Was it a cathartic exercise, or was it something that you just felt like you had to do?
Both. And I would say I felt like I had to do it was more like giving purpose to my life. There's a whole book called Finding Meaning written by David Kessler of grief.com about the drive and need for the survivor to find meaning in the loss. And in this case, looking back, clearly that's what I've been doing with the show, the catalog, and now I had this material. I could turn the story of our years together and the story of Lynn's death into something that other people would gain from. So that drove me.
Yeah.
The first few months, the first time I moved through the material, I was crying again and again and again and again, because I was reliving all of these scenes, reading what I had written, and then iteratively remembering more and filling in the gaps. My memory is not actually better than anyone else's. I didn't remember most of the stuff when I first started.
Yeah.
But the process of working through it again and again, I would suddenly go, oh yeah, oh right.
Yep.
This happened and that happened. And then I would write those scenes. By a few months in, it had stopped being cathartic and it was a craft project. I've always been a writer. I used to write film scripts. I've even written an unpublished novel before years and years ago. So for me, turning this into a book where you genuinely want to turn the pages was an important project. I didn't want to do all of this and have it be a book where you go, well, that's meaningful, but I got bored or it was too painful and I stopped turning the pages. So that is what drove me for like 6 months of the year.
Yeah.
And then I finished the book and I was hardly crying anymore. And I recorded the audiobook. And that was unbelievably cathartic. Not unbelievably, you couldn't believe it, but it took me by surprise.
Yeah.
Because I sat in the room where I had written these notes, which is right across the hall from where we're sitting now, where I'd written Caring Bridge. And now I was no longer writing the book. It was locked. The words were locked. So you go, as a writer, you move from this mode until the words are finalized and your team says, you're not allowed to change another word, Tony. We're on deadline here. I was making changes until just a few weeks before that.
Sure.
Now I was not allowed to make any more changes, and I just read the thing. And I experienced it all over again. And I'm told that I did a really good job narrating it. And I think you can hear it because I was really living it.
I'm sure.
And having to take breaks and pauses.
Yeah.
that was cathartic again.
Yeah.
So
it's a beautiful journey. Why the name Carrying the Tiger?
Yeah. I love the name. It comes from an email that a friend wrote Lynn just a few weeks in. And the email reads, as I remember it, in our Tai Chi group, and Lynn and I didn't know anything about Tai Chi. In our Tai Chi group, we carry a tiger for someone who is facing a difficult challenge. The 3 motions of bending low, lifting up the tiger, and putting it on a hilltop far away make that challenge less scary because a tiger on a hilltop is no longer so threatening. And Lynn wrote back to her friend and said, "That's beautiful. Would you carry some tigers for me? And could you teach me how to carry tigers?" And that is where...
Wow.
I really feel that is the most beautiful metaphor, and that it applies to all the 3 sections of the book. Because the subtitle of the book, which I wanted to spell this out so that no one would read this book and be painfully surprised. I want you to know what you're in for when you read the book, and hopefully you'll experience the joy that flows through it. But still, the subtitle is Living with Cancer, Dying with Grace, Finding Joy While Grieving. And I see those as the 3 challenges. And each one required learning to do it, learning to carry the tiger. The 3rd one I had to do without Lynn, although she was helping me in my heart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wow. I mean, it's just such a human story. And I think that whether people relate to one part or all parts of it, it's something that everybody can relate to this in some way. I mean, I'm listening to some of your talk of grief, and while my grief has been different than yours, for sure, I identify with parts of it. And I think it's why it's so important to tell these stories, and why I'm so happy that people like you that have these stories commit to writing them down and honoring your own experience, but honoring your loved ones as well. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
This is very much what I had in mind. And I've been so happy this last few months having conversations like this, realizing, my book is touching people. Yeah. My book is helping people. It's out there. It's gotten these great reviews. But most importantly, I just got a note yesterday. Someone went to my website, found the contact me form, and wrote in it, "I just finished your book. My husband died 16 months ago. Reading about what you went through and where you are now really helped me." That's it. Yeah. She sent me this note. She didn't have to do that. But she's exactly the kind of person I imagined that I was writing the book for. And my goodness, talking on podcasts or getting it reviewed or whatever has worked. She found the book. Yeah. She found the book. She read the book. This is what I hope happens.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, we were talking earlier about art and our wanting to consume but not necessarily reward. And I do firmly believe, and doing this podcast has reinforced this belief, is that whoever's meant to find this will find it. Whoever's meant to hear your story will hear it. Because I can't believe that so much heart and soul goes into these projects with no benefit. Right. I don't believe that. I think that putting it out there for people in an effort to help and to have them relate to you and relate to your experiences and to maybe just let somebody know that they're not alone. I have to believe that always means something, whether or not you see the benefit of it directly.
Right. I have to believe that, because otherwise I would be really depressed, because it costs a bunch of money to create a book like this and to market it and get it out there like this.
Yeah.
And I was told from day one by the people I asked, you will probably not get that money back. Don't do this if you're doing it for the money.
Yeah. I'm glad they were upfront about it. That's good.
They were totally upfront. There are even people who write. I've learned a lot this last few months because I've been trying to study how do I market my book, and the successful. I'm stumbling all over my words here because I want to rule out, like, okay, the famous people, the people who get picked up by a big publisher and write great thrillers or something in that world. That's different. Mm-hmm. But the less known people who are making a living writing typically genre books, romances, thrillers, science fiction, various combinations of those are the books that a lot of people really want to read. And they self-publish, they put them out on Amazon and places like that. Even then, it's not till your second or third or fourth book that you start maybe making money. And you need a bunch of books out there before you have a chance of making money, because eventually the money you spend marketing the third or fourth book, the readers who like it buy the earlier ones.
Yeah.
And finally, you're now selling the earlier ones without paying any money to market them, and finally you start getting your money back.
Okay. Yeah.
I have exactly one book. And it's on a difficult topic that is not a genre book. There's a smaller set of people who want to read this kind of memoir. For those who do, I'm pretty confident it really works. I mean, I now have enough reviews from the professional reviewers, the Amazon reader reviews. There's a bunch of them now. I now know, yes, this book is really working for the people it's meant to work for.
Yeah.
But just before we had recorded this, I had a call, as you know, because you were here in this apartment. Mm-hmm. I had a call with my publishing company advisors. And the one thing they said that I found most interesting was they were thinking, Tony, you should write a second book. Your book is really great, and it's getting these reviews. It's not going to get its money back. But if you write a second book that is more of a how-to kind of, here's what I learned, here are the lessons I learned, here's how you can get through these experiences, which is a more traditional kind of book than the one I wrote.
Yep.
You'll probably, be able to do better with that than this one, because it's a kind of book that people really want to buy. People who are grieving, they look for the self-help, the how-to.
Yeah, they
and
want
by the way, maybe you'll finally make money on carrying the tiger because you'll get a bigger audience.
Okay, hey.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
But I'm not worrying about that.
Yeah.
I'm not worrying about that.
Yeah. But if it happens,
great. It would be great, because I learned a lot of lessons, and I didn't write them in this book. I wanted this book to be my journey where you're with me, where you get to feel what it was like.
Yeah.
Because I think that itself is very meaningful.
Yes.
And I wanted people to feel, if they're on a similar journey or a friend of theirs is, like, oh, what they're going through, well, that's actually kind of normal. Mm-hmm. The extreme stress, the things that happen. A lot of things happen that I never imagined. And guess what? Something like that happens to almost everyone who takes this journey.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I wanted you to feel that. And that's what I did with this book. Maybe the next book I'll write about all the lessons I learned.
There you go. Well, we'll have to check back in. So I'm assuming people can get your book everywhere books are sold?
Carrying the Tiger. It is available everywhere books are sold. Of course, it's on Amazon. I'm really happy because the average kicked up to 4.6 stars just yesterday. It went up from 4.5 to 4.6.
Fantastic.
So absolutely. But it's also for those who don't like or want to buy on Amazon. It's available at all the other sources. And as I said, it's out as an audiobook, it's out as ebook, and it's out in print.
Wonderful. Well, we will link to all of this in the show notes so people can find you easily as well. But I do have one question I ask everyone at the end of each episode, which is, through the lens of your experience, what does compassion mean to you?
Compassion to me means listening and not judging. Means hearing and taking it in without judging. That may naturally lead to actions, but I think it starts with just really listening.
I agree. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your candor and your vulnerability. It's important. I think it's an important part of telling our stories, and they should affect us, and they should, make us continue to feel things. So I appreciate you for that.
Well, you're really welcome. This was an amazing conversation. I thank you for going on the road and doing this.
Yeah, come visit the magical city.
Yes. I hope you enjoy your afternoon in New York.
Yeah, I certainly will.
Thank you for listening to The Human Experience. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, share it with your friends and family, share it on social media, and rate and review it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also support the podcast financially by going to my website, thehxpod.com, linked in the show notes, and clicking on Donate. It takes a lot of time and resources to create this podcast, so every little bit helps. Everyone has a story, and I'd love to hear yours. So be sure to check out the show notes for more information about how to stay in touch. Do good and love well.